Hi all. Today let me discuss the essay From Columbus to Sachin Tendulkar by R Viswanathan, a very famous professor of English and literary critic from Kerala. And this article has been published in Calicut University Research Journal. So the title of the essay is From Columbus to Sachin Tendulkar. If you look at the title, you will be wondering, what is the connection between Columbus and Sachin Tendulkar. So that kind of a curiosity we may have. And interestingly, in anywhere in the essay, nowhere in the essay, the writer is talking about Columbus. So what is the connection between these two individuals or these two figures, prominent figures? Columbus is a historical figure, and Sachin Tendulkar is a very famous Indian cricketer, the god of cricket. Normally he is regarded as the god of cricket. And obviously you may not find much connection between this essay. So let's see what he is trying to speak or trying to argue in this essay, From Columbus to Sachin Tendulkar. So he begins this essay with the moment of Sachin Tendulkar's moment of completing the 10,000 runs in international cricket, and it has been celebrated all over the world, and the media, especially the Indian media, at TV channels, television news channels, and everywhere there were huge celebrations as if it is a historic moment. Of course, it's a historic moment in the history of cricket. But other than that, what is the speciality of, or what is the importance of such an achievement in the whole history of the world? Or in this essay, the author asks why such achievements by other games or sports items like hockey or table tennis or any other, or football, they don't invite that kind of an attention from the media. Okay, so why? But again, his point is not the undue importance given to cricket. That is not the point. But what makes it interesting, and what is the connection between Columbus and Sachin Tendulkar? As I said, Columbus is a historical figure. He was a very famous explorer, and he is one of the persons who founded the or laid the foundation stones for colonialism. He reached in West Indies towards his journey to India. He reached in that island, and he thought that that is India, and he called it India, which all of you know that history, a very interesting history, and that was one of the very early years of colonialism. And after that, the colonial powers, they explored the other countries, and they conquered the countries, and they settled colonies there, exploited the people. These are all historical facts. And one area of comparison which the author, the critic R Viswanathan, is coming out with is both, and especially one feature of both the cricket and the colonialism is that both do not respect boundaries. Okay, so as a colonial explorer is exploring through voyaging through the seas, crossing the boundaries of countries, the cricket batsman, he is also voyaging using the bat as for example the paddle. Okay, as a Columbus or a Gama or Captain Cook once voyaged, the cricketer is also doing the same thing. So unlike other forms of games and arts, now for example, if you look at other games like hockey, for example, or even football, boundary is very much important. If you cross the boundary, that is a foul in almost all other games. But in the case of a batsman, crossing the boundary is something which everybody celebrates. So this is where the similarity occurs. Both the colonial explorer as well as the batsman both are successful when they are crossing the boundaries. That is one area where this occurs. And there is another a dimension as well, which he says that, for example, cricket became an international kind of a game because of colonialism. Okay, it was a game originated in England, the story, things like that. It originated in the peasants, the shepherds, they were playing in the pastures and all that. Then after England became a colonial power, that game reached in other countries. And the countries which were once colonized, they didn't have any problem in accepting this colonial game. This is a colonial game, so it was the white man's game, so we shouldn't play it. That was not the mindset of people from colonial countries. Almost all the colonial once colonized countries, this game is popular. And if you take some other games, for example, like chess, which was originally originated in India as Chaturangam, and during the colonial period it reached in the Western world and they reincarnated in another form as chess. But in the new form, in the reincarnated form, it had come out with some kind of changes. Okay, there was this queen, as British queen was the head and the leader. In the same way, queen became a very prominent element of queen's chess, as contrary to Chaturangam. So there were some such kinds of significant changes in the reincarnated form. But even then, there was no resistance from the part of the colonized countries in accepting it. So that was one point which R. Viswanathan says. Both whether it is a colonial originated game like cricket, or a colonially reincarnated form like chess, whether when it was reintroduced into the colonized countries or introduced into the colonized countries, there was no resistance from the part. So what makes, what kind of DNA it has which resists that kind of an ideological encounter? So it is obvious that games have mimetic as well as semiotic dimensions. He says that it has, just like any other forms, any other art forms, or any other cultural forms, even games have mimetic and semiotic dimensions. Mimetic in the sense that it has mimetic, means imitative. It imitates life. For example, hunting, which imitates the hide and the games like hunting and the games like hide and seek, run and touch, kabaddi, these are all imitative in the sense that they imitate the real life hide and seek, hunting, real life incidents like hunting. And games like chess and football imitates and even like war, okay, real life incidents like war. And games like snake and ladder imitates journeys. So in this sense we can say that games are mimetic, okay. And late originally, when a game like chess or kabaddi originated, it was purely mimetic in the sense that it imitates a real life incident or a real life feature. But later it acquires some kind of a semiotic dimensions, and it became secular in the sense that all those kinds of origin and such kinds of things became irrelevant in the process of its growth. That is what he says. So though culture and geography are very much involved in the making of a game, in so far as the final form that it acquires, it is neither conspicuously mimetic nor overtly referential. So that is what he says. Again, he compares this with the games like cricket with the colonialism, how it originated, so and its growth. So he is comparing again a game like cricket with romantic poetry. So what is the connection between romantic poetry and cricket, a game like cricket? So again, both originated in the Western country, especially romantic poetry in almost all the Western countries. It has its influence in Britain as well. So it became prominent in the Eastern countries because of the colonialism. And again, the connection which he says is that cricket originated in England, and in romantic poetry as well, it originated in European countries. But if you look at the romantic poetry, again, as we said about, as we talked about cricket, even they also didn't respect boundaries, or their imagination has crossed the boundaries. So that is what he says. It expanded when the colonial passion haunted the British imagination. The batsman and the romantic poet emerged alike as great trespassers. So he termed both the romantic poet and the cricketer as trespassers because they encroach upon the boundaries of the other person's land. For one thing, the geographical vistas of the romantic imagination expanded more, almost in proportion to the expansion of the British Empire. And also in their poetry, you can find the imagination crossing over the boundaries. For example, he is giving the example of John Keats' poem on first looking into Chapman's Homer. In that, this line, much have I travelled in the realms of God, and many goodly states and kingdoms seen. Round many western islands have I been, which bards in fealty to Apollo hold. So he says that in his imagination, he had crossed many lands, he had seen many lands, things like that. Again, in Solitary Reaper, in poems like Wordsworth Solitary Reaper or John Keats' Nightingale Ode. So, for example, the Solitary Reaper, if you look at the poem, no nightingale did ever chant more welcome notes to weary bands of travellers in some shady haunt among Arabian sands. A voice so thrilling never was heard in springtime from cuckoo bird, breaking the silence of the seas among the farthest Hebrides. The Solitary Reaper. So, in that, the lands like Arabian sands and the Hebrides, the islands in the west coast of Scotland, such kinds of things emerges. For example, again in a poem like Ode to a Nightingale, the saying that oft times hath charmed magic casements opening on the form of perilous seas in fairy lands forlorn. So, in nutshell, we can say that in romantic poetry also they were talking about lands outside their territory, their imagination, or in his own words, the Sixers by Wordsworth and Keats are among the highlights of the brief innings of British romantic poetry. If he uses the terminology from cricket. So his question is, what would be the general reaction of the spectators to a dramatic presentation that tries to recapture and not mechanically imitate the spirit of an exciting one-day cricket match on the stage? So if there was some kind of an influence of a game into a fictional work or a literary work, what would be the reaction of the audience? So he is coming out with the work of Eugene O'Neill's The Emperor Jones, in which he says that can be imitated like it was a kind of a metamorphosed mythemic content of a cricket match, because he says that you may have studied The Emperor Jones. The jungle where most of the action takes place is a variant of the cricket ground. The islanders who have positioned themselves in different parts of the jungle to catch Brutus Jones are the fielders. They haunt him with the drums and try to bowl him out by deploying all their tricks. He defends himself with the revolver against the ghosts and phantoms that appear one after another before him. Like a confident batsman, initially he plays the shots very well indeed, but we should cross the boundary of the jungle to make his final escape. So just as a batsman has to be successful while crossing the boundary, Brutus Jones also, in order to be successful, he needs to cross the boundary of the jungle in order to save himself from the enemies. So this is one way we can see how a work of art is influenced by a game like a cricket. So he is again giving other examples like Samuel Beckett's Endgame, Waiting for Godot, which are all influenced by games like chess, because Endgame is one element in chess. So another example he is giving is N.S. Madhavan's short story Higuita, which you will be studying in the next semester probably. So the story unfolds the mental landscape of Father Georgis, where his own role as a man of social and moral commitment and that of Colombian goalkeeper Higuita merge frequently. So the title of the story is Higuita. The central character in the story is Father Georgis, who was once a football player, and his attack on the villain is termed as the story writer narrates it with football imagery. So he says that in the point of his transformation, he is acting as, or he is projected as Christ standing alone, just like Higuita in the goalpost is like the lonely Christ standing alone, distanced from his disciples. Again, other mythological figures like David, Lord Shiva, Ganga, all these come into play in the formation of this story. So, what he's trying to say is that when an element of game or the nature of game is transformed into, metamorphosed into a kind of an artistic work, the nature of that game will influence the structure of the work. Okay, so he says that art, ritual, and sport are three distinct realms that can represent or reformulate the patterns of life as comprehended by the mind. So these three elements, art, ritual, and sports. Perhaps it is not even possible to think of a fourth realm that has such a potential. Art and ritual, as clearly mentioned, are amenable to ideological encounters and are capable of inciting criticism from a social, political, or cultural vantage point. So, art, ritual, and sport, these are three realms that can represent or reformulate the patterns of life. But when it comes to art and ritual, these can invite criticism from others if there is some kind of an issue. Some groups will always come and question why such a representation is there in art. Our feelings are, our emotions are being hurt by the representation of such and such thing in a film or in a drama. Such kinds of criticism can occur. Such kinds of criticism can occur in art and ritual forms. But sport and games, these are always above such kinds of criticism. Even though there are elements where we can criticize it, as we have already said, cricket is a colonial game or emerged as a colonial game, and it has some inherent features which celebrates crossing of the boundaries, or other games like chess, which has transformed and inserted some colonial elements into it in its process. So there are elements where we can criticize a game, or there are elements where we can criticize a sport item, but these are always above such kinds of criticisms. Why? This is the central question which R. Viswanathan asks in this essay. So again he says that in sports, on the other hand, the signifier relationship is fairly constant. Their rules and regulations remain virtually unchanged for centuries. The rules of football or tennis have, for instance, changed very little in the past 50 years, but the conventions of poetry and drama underwent drastic changes in almost every decade of the 20th century. Again, there are close relationship between these two forms, or these three forms, art, ritual, and sport, which he says. Despite such a differences, these three realms are very closely allied to one another. For a number of art forms, for example, Greek tragedy and games such as bullfighting or jellicut, have originated from rituals. So we say that if you go to the origin of Greek tragedy, it originated from ritual, from their worshipping of the Greek god. And bullfighting or jellicut, even in the present century, there are ritual kind of connotations to jellicut. That is why banning of jellicut is a very crucial issue or very controversial issue in India. So therefore they can interpenetrate and acquire altogether new forms and functions. So with the advent of modernism and postmodernism, there have been serious efforts to revive the ties of art forms and games and rituals. So there are works like Eugene O'Neill's Emperor Jones, Eliot's Murder in the Cathedral, Beckett's Waiting for Godot, Pinter's The Birthday Party, Who is afraid of Virginia Woolf, in which we can find the relationship between all these. But the central question which the author asks here is why sport items or games escape a kind of an ideological inquiry and questioning contrary to artworks. So this is the question he raises predominantly in this essay, and he is not coming out with any no specific answers, and he is just throwing us a question: why such kinds of uh, sport items, they are not inviting the criticism. For example, you can very simply say that if you come out with an artwork or even an advertisement in which those feelings of a certain community is they feel that their feelings are being hurt, it will be subjected to crucial criticism, it will be censored, it will be banned. But you cannot find any game which is banned. You cannot find any cricket or match or any other sport items coming out with such a criticism from any interest groups or pressure groups. So this is the issue which R. Viswanathan raises in this essay. Thank you.